Hey Ebenezer Youth, my name is Wes Hodgson and I serve here as the pastor of College and Career Ministries at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And it's a pleasure to be with you as you begin a new series looking at the book of Ecclesiastes. And so for our time today, we're going to try and answer three big questions of this book. We're going to look at who, what, and why. So let's dive into our first question of who. Who is the character behind this book? Now, it's widely attributed by most scholars that the person speaking in the book of Ecclesiastes is King Solomon. And that's not 100% agreed upon, but it is most widely accepted. And that's the perspective that I'm going to teach from today. So let's take a few minutes and just look at who King Solomon was. For some of you listening, you know exactly who King Solomon was. He's a well-known biblical figure. But for others of you, you may not know him at all. Solomon was one of the most famous kings in all of ancient Israel. He was the son of one of the most famous kings, that is King David, in ancient Israel. And after David passed away, Solomon was announced as king over Israel. And in this time of history, Israel was a very wealthy and powerful nation. And as Solomon began his reign as king, things started off on a very good foot. We read this in 1 Kings chapter 3, beginning at verse 5. At Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want to give me." So God appears to Solomon in a dream and straight up asks him, "Ask me for whatever you want." This is an amazing moment, and this is what Solomon asks for. Verse 9. "Please give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings." So this is just a small picture of how Solomon began his reign as king. God comes to him in a dream and says, Ask me for whatever you wish. And Solomon replies, "Would you give me a heart of justice to lead your people well? Would you give me a heart of wisdom?" And God is so pleased by this that he says, not only am I going to give you wisdom, but I'm going to give you long life and blessings on top of blessings. This is an amazing divine upgrade for Solomon. And throughout Solomon's reign, this is what happened. He became extremely wise and wealthy, and he enjoyed a season of peace and prosperity that was unparalleled in Israel's history. But over time, all of Solomon's wealth, his prosperity, his influence, all of that over time caused his heart to drift from God. We read this as well in 1 Kings 11, verses 1 through 3. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonites, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after other gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. Now, before I comment on this passage, let me state something real quick. Sometimes, especially in Old Testament passages, you will hear things that are really bad and really awful, and there will be a quick jump to think, oh wow, the Bible talks about this? Does that mean that God thinks it's okay? And what you need to remember, especially when we're reading Old Testament narrative, is that there's a difference between prescriptive and descriptive texts. A prescriptive statement is something that is telling you to do something. So for example, when you go to the pharmacist and they give you a prescription and they tell you, you need to take this 3 times a day, every day for the next 3 weeks, that's a prescription. It's telling you to do something. But the Bible also has a lot of passages that are descriptive. And a descriptive passage of Scripture is not necessarily saying this is right behavior or this is wrong behavior. Lots of times, descriptive texts are just telling you what happened. They're telling you a story. And that's important to remember when we're reading the Bible. Just because the Bible describes something that happened, it doesn't mean that God condones it. God was not cool with Solomon taking as many wives as he did. And as you just keep reading in 1 Kings, you will see that. This decision turned Solomon's heart away from God, and it eventually led to the breaking up of the kingdom of Israel. This is a horrible tragedy. And as he enters this final chapter of his life, Solomon begins to share his thoughts. Ecclesiastes is kind of like Solomon's memoir. As he reflects back on the life that he lived, he wants to share with us some things that he learned along the way. So that is a bit of the who behind this book. Let's get into the what. The book of Ecclesiastes is part of the wisdom genre of Scripture. The Bible is a library of many books, and it has many different genres and themes, and wisdom literature is one of those themes. And if we want to know what's going on in this book, all we need to do is look at the first few verses. So let's read them together. Chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 of Ecclesiastes. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Okay, so right off the bat, we are introduced to a major theme of what this whole book is about. Solomon is near the end of his life, and as he sees his end coming, he says this word again and again, meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Now, the word that Solomon uses here in Hebrew is the word hevel, and many of our English translations of the Bible translate this into meaningless, but some of the best ways to actually translate it into English is the word vapor or smoke. Just imagine you have a candle or a campfire. As soon as you blow out that candle, or as soon as you pour water on that campfire, it instantly turns into smoke. And that smoke is there for a moment, and if you try to grab it, it's going to go right through your fingers. That's the word picture that Solomon is trying to communicate with this word hevel. It's smoke, it's vapor. What was once this bright, life-giving flame is now vanished. And Solomon is at the end of his life, and he's saying, that's a lot of what life is like. You are here for a moment, and then you're gone. And the more you try to hold on to that, the more it slips right through your fingers. And throughout the book, Solomon talks about how all of these things are meaningless. They are like smoke. He talks about how pointless and meaningless it is to chase after pleasure. Chapter 2, verses 10 through 11, he says this, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Solomon had everything you could ever wish or hope for. He was as rich or richer perhaps than even some of our modern day billionaires like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. Yet he gets to the end of his life and he says, this is pointless. He goes on throughout the book to talk about a number of different things that are meaningless, like working hard or even wisdom itself. But all of this meaninglessness stems from one thing, and that is the fact of death. And he says this in chapter 3, verses 19 and 20. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Listen to that last line again. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Now, as I've been reading this book, it seems a little bit bleak, right? What's the point of money? What's the point of work? What's the point of wisdom? We're all just going to die. Really positive, upbeat sermon here, Pastor Wes. Thanks for the pep talk. But this leads us to our final point, which is why? What is life all about anyway? Why is this existential question that every person asks of every generation at some point? And as we move throughout this series, you're going to see very good and helpful answers to this why question. But here is a thought I would like to leave you with today. Doubt, discouragement, and despair are all a part of the human condition. It doesn't matter if you are wealthy and privileged or if you are a poor victim of real injustice. Everyone feels this at some point. Everyone experiences this at some point in their lives. Solomon uses this word hevel again and again in this book, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. The more you try to get a hold of things, the more it slips right through your fingers. And even though this is fundamental to the human experience, and the Bible deals with these questions honestly, over the next few weeks as you explore this book, you will see that God does not leave us without hope. Even though we will face despair and discouragement and doubt in our lives, as Solomon is clearly pointing to as he writes this memoir, we don't have to stay in that place of doubt and discouragement and despair. I've said that hevel is like trying to grab smoke, like chasing after the wind. The more you try to hold on to your life, the more it slips away. But the good news is that that is not the end of the story. There was one who came later who was even wiser than Solomon. And he said these words in Luke chapter 9, verse 24. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for my sake will save it. Jesus is the greatest man who ever lived. He is God in human flesh. And he understands our doubts and the pits of our despair better than anyone. And he, in his incredible love, looks at us in our doubts and despair. He looks at us in our hevel. And he says, if you keep trying to save your life, if you keep trying to be in control, it is going to be like trying to grasp the smoke. You can try as much as you want, but it's just going to keep slipping right through your fingers. But if you are willing to lose your life, if you are willing to trust me, if you're willing to give over the control of your life to me, you will save your life because I will save you. I will rescue you from that despair. I will lift you out of that doubt and discouragement, and I will give you a hope and a purpose. This is the good news that Jesus offers to us. And so as we close, I want to encourage you, even though this book of Ecclesiastes seems a little bit bleak, it deals honestly with the hard questions of life. And the good news is that God does not leave us in those hard places, but he comes with a message of hope and good news. So whether you are an Ebenezer regular at this point, or maybe you're listening for the first time, we hope that you will be blessed on your journey in God here at Ebenezer Youth. Thanks for listening, and I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day wherever you are. God bless you.